there's some good things happening. Lord, we just trust you with it. And I pray that you would help us to do our part to point to you. We thank you for the word, especially the book of Genesis. Certainly understand how foundational this book is. Thank you for the Lord Jesus Christ, him crucified, him risen.
Yes.
Should bless this time in Jesus' name.
Amen. Well, last time we had looked at how that Jacob started favoring his son Joseph over his other 11 brothers, and that's never a good thing. As I was looking back over it this week, it came to my realization that Joseph was the oldest son of the wife he loved. And so that naturally is going to reflect on Jacob's love for Joseph. Now, it's put in here that Jacob loved Joseph because he was the son of his old age, but now Benjamin is also a young boy. So Benjamin is the son of his old age. So anyway, I just point that out. This is not something that his brothers did not quickly observe. They quickly understood that Joseph was the favored one, and he was number 11 out of 12, and certainly not high up in the arrangement of things. So we saw how Joseph had a couple of dreams, and both of those dreams ended up implying, actually presciently stating, that Joseph's brothers will be bowing down to him. And he's 17 years old, and they're older. Probably the oldest, Reuben, is probably something like 26 years old, because there was a 7-year span where all the boys were born. So Reuben being the first, he's probably 26 years old, and everybody else in between. Anyway, the brothers hated Joseph because he was the favored, because Jacob made him a coat, as it's described in King James, coat of many colors. The Hebrew says a coat of long sleeves and long to the ground. That's the thing. That's its description in the Hebrew. And the only place that's used is with something, for example, David, when Jonathan gave David his royal coat because he loved David and he wanted to honor David. This kind of garment is one of somebody who you are elevating to high position. And so Jacob, by default, is elevating Joseph to a high position. And his brothers see that. And they're thinking, how is this runt kid elevated above us? So that's kind of the backstory. And we pick up here in I believe we left off in verse 12 last week. And we find out that his brothers had gone to feed their father's flock at Shechem. Now, what happened at Shechem? What's important about Shechem? Read the note.
Isn't that where they killed that one village?
Correct. The entire village
And Jacob said, now you've made my name to stink.
Yes, correct. And then God said, okay, now up and move. But the people, the implication at that time, the people, the tribes were in fear, but it was God's fear placed on them. They weren't in fear of what are the two brothers' names? I have it. Simeon and Levi. They were not in fear of Simeon and Levi. They were not in fear of what Simeon and Levi did. They were in fear because God gave a godly fear of the people in the land. But God told him to move, go to Bethel. And then Jacob moved further south, and he is now in the south. He's now living in the area where Abraham lived, where Isaac is living. And the brothers took the sheep and went back up to Shechem. Now notice verse 13 here. And let's see if I can get this over here. Notice verse 13. And Israel said unto Joseph, do not your brothers feed the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send thee unto them. And he said unto him, here I am. That is, Joseph says, verse 14, and he said, go, I pray thee, and see whether it be well with your brothers. So Jacob is really feeling it because they're at Shechem, and he's worried about it. So he wants to see if his brothers are well and the flocks, and bring me word again. That's again the position of what you would have for a supervisor. Joseph is taking that role. So then he sent him out of the valley of Hebron and sent him up, and he came to Shechem. So from that, we see this kind of give you a pictorial of what's going on here. So he left from Hebron down here in the south. And this is where Abraham was. It's where Isaac was. This is where Jacob is. So he left the valley of Hebron and he went north to Shechem. These kinds of events where the events at Shechem fade over time, but it really hasn't been that long a time.
But no, they did kill all the dudes. So
they did, but not the other towns. And these are all families.
So you think they just kind of moved in on the space and just...
Well, I'm sure they did move in on the space, but I'm also thinking that they remember. So Joseph now comes down there and he's wandering around. In verse 15, a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, what are you looking for? What are you seeking? And Joseph, he was actually much younger the last time he was there. And so to him, they would not recognize him as belonging to Israel's family, because he was about 6 years old when they came into Shechem. And they weren't there very long, 2 or 3 years. And then they're out, so he at most 8, 9, 10 years old. So he's 17 now, and he will look very much different. So they don't recognize him. The people there don't recognize him. It's probably why Jacob sent him, because he would have recognized that they would not recognize him. But look at verse 16. And he said, I'm looking for my brothers. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, oh, they're departed hence. For I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. And again, up here, we looked at that. It's not too far north. It's right actually on the edge of the Mount Gerizim. On the backside of Mount Gerizim comes down into the Jezreel Valley. And so they're just north of that, and that's important that they're up there, because we're going to see here in just a couple of minutes. So the men said, I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brother and found them at Dothan. So again, another picture that I put in here of this. These are really faded up here. Is there anything can be done with the contrast there? You know?
Not try to right click on the image.
Right, but that's,
He's talking to
sharp,
TV.
is it sharp where you are? Because it's the
Yes, it
contrast
looks
is sharp
differently.
over here.
oh, is it? Is it sharp for you?
No. I'm saying look at the contrast on the icons and on everything else. Is it the same? It's different. That may be just
Scale look like 40 miles.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, go ahead.
minimal.
Especially if you hadn't been there in a long time, you know, there's like, what's your guide markers?
Well, so I was sitting there trying to piece it together. I'm like, okay, so if I walked from the north end of the tollway to the south end of the
It's
tollway,
not about, well, that
that might help.
might help.
might be just about right. That's a little bit of walking.
Like there's going to be some unfriendly territory that you're going to have to traverse to get there.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's try that because it was washed out
It's hard
as if it was,
like nothing there, and just unscathed, no brigands, no.
But if you look at that, so
It's a high quality TV.
yes.
yes. Correct me if I'm wrong. This would be considered more high plain, high mountain.
It's actually when it talks about the mountains of Israel, this is what it's talking about.
Okay.
So from that edge on the north all the way down to the south, through Jerusalem, Jerusalem being the high point. But from the edge up here at the north, all the way down here, that's the mountains of Israel. If you go towards the coastline, about halfway down there, you get into a valley. There's a valley here. Up north is the Jezreel Valley up here, which extends over to the Jordan River Valley, and it extends around the top of the Sea of Galilee. And then there's another part that kind of goes up diagonally to the northeast from there. But this is, what's that?
Those aren't really super high mountains.
No, they're not. 2,000 max.
Very small.
Yeah. But when it talks about the mountains of Israel, this is what it's talking about, this area. And if you look at it today, it's the area known as Palestinian area or the West Bank. All right, so notice verse 18 then. Let me get over here and verse 18. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near to them, they conspired against him to slay him. Now, the area where they are is an elevated area, and it's approached from the south in a kind of a valley. It's between Mount Ebal and Gerizim. And you find that those are very important places in the future, but they're up in the area of Mount Gerizim, and maybe just a little bit north of that. They have a high position, and Joseph's coat would certainly set him apart as he's coming in there. So they have the vantage point, and they can recognize that coat from a great distance. And verse 19, and they said one to another, behold, the dreamer comes. Verse 20, come now, therefore, and let us kill him, let us slay him, and cast him into the pit, or into some pit. And we will say, some evil beast has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. And again, that kind of hatred is a typical reaction from jealousy. Look at verse 22, 21. Reuben heard it. Now, who's Reuben?
The oldest.
The oldest.
This is the most ironic out of this whole thing. Because if anybody, quote unquote, would want him dead, who is it?
It would be Reuben. But
This is,
But also remember that Reuben has a lot to fix and a lot
he does. That's the point.
to wrap
I
up.
was,
Because he lost his position.
see, I'm thinking that, I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
No, go ahead.
The first thought that came into my mind was Reuben knows that he messed up,
Yes.
feels guilty about it,
Yes.
and so he doesn't want to do anything else
Right.
with his father.
I agree.
That's what
And that's where I would go with that. That is exactly where I would go with that. It is Reuben, because of that one verse in the previous chapter, he is in deep trouble.
but he is the personification of a politician. Now,
Okay. Yes.
now it's all about self-preservation.
Reuben's feeling,
No, I don't. And I'm going to tell you why. Because look at the next verse. And Reuben said unto them, shed no blood. But,
Cast him in the pit.
but,
Yeah.
you don't know the rest of it though. He plans to come back.
well, why would he agree to put him in a pit in the wilderness and just
Calm him down.
calm who down?
He's trying
His brothers.
Bingo, thank you very much.
Yes, yes.
He is the personification of a politician.
Yeah.
He does not want to lose control of the situation.
Right. And he does lose control.
Yeah.
But partially only.
Yeah.
Only partially lose control.
But
Yes. So Reuben heard of it, and he went and he delivered Joseph out of their hands. He delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. So consider Reuben's offer here to placate his brothers. Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into the pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands. That's his purpose, to deliver him to his father again. But now watch the next events that start to unfold here. Verse 23, and it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. Now, again, notice the animosity directed to the coat because of what it represents. There's a utility reason for doing that too, because they're fixing to dip that in blood and bring that back as evidence. They are not going to let this dreamer rule over them. And it did not matter that their father had sent him to check up on them. They did not care. So that's the brothers, not Reuben, but that's the rest of the brothers that are here. And there's reason to believe that Judah may not have been among them when we'll see in the next chapter. The way that it's written, it seems to overlap this time frame, and it seems that he is elsewhere at this time.
Think you're in a dysfunctional family, read the Bible.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
I think the thing he was trying to say earlier,
Yes.
look at where Reuben's maneuvering them to is his sister. And how far away they are. I think Reuben's thinking he could live a few days with the water.
Except it was dry.
I thought it was money. Because if it was wet, he would drown, right? Like if it was full.
It was empty and there was no water in it.
There was no water in it. Ooh, that would have been a terrible fall.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure Reuben has great feelings for Joseph. I think it has more to do with his father than Joseph.
Right. Yes.
He wants to somehow get that back, that birthright, if he can.
Yeah, I was thinking
thinking that maybe Reuben, by throwing Joseph into the pit and then bringing him back to his father, he would gain more favor in his father's sight or something.
That's a good point.
Let's think that through though, because what's Joseph going to tell his father? If he delivers Joseph back to Jacob, what is Joseph even going to say? He's going to say, "Where's your coat?" And what news is going to be delivered to Jacob by Joseph? And then who's the deliverer? Reuben.
Yes.
It's not only that, but, my brothers, they were plotting to kill him. I told them, let's just throw him in this pit instead. And then we left him there for a few days. Then I came back to go get him. Like, who's the hero here?
Well, he did it to protect Joseph.
Right.
He could have ended up dead too.
Yes.
At this point, what they're thinking, the way that those guys are thinking, there's 10, maybe 9, okay, guys who or no, 8, maybe 9.
Yes.
Guys all riled up and they're ready to kill someone. What's one more?
Right.
Yeah.
Underneath the story, because they're done with it, and they see Joseph as a hindrance to their eventual wealth.
Right.
I have strong feelings for Joseph, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're good or positive.
Right.
One thing that also interesting, the animosity toward that coat, and I was just thinking, what kind of animosity does mankind have toward Jesus? Where's the coat that covers our sin? It's really interesting to look at this coat, what it represents, and you look at Jesus and what he represents.
Mm-hmm.
For some, it makes them gnash their teeth.
It's the exact same parallel, though. People just can't humble themselves to allow Jesus to reign over them.
That's the key. Yes. That's it. That's the point. Yes.
He's in charge. He's in control. Not. I'm not in control.
Right.
When you're growing up and you're taught that you need to control your life from the beginning at points, especially some people, myself growing up, don't want to give up that.
So, buddy, you either control yourself or I'm going to control you.
Sledgehammer hitting it outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had no choice but to be controlled my whole life.
That's because you have to grow up and learn to be an adult. And once you cross over into that, then you're going to suddenly be free as a bird. You're going to make all kinds of mistakes and you're going to go, that's why they were trying to teach me.
I feel like more specifically, my aunt and my cousin, I'm not going to specify which,
Uh-huh.
might try to control me even after I'm on my, because they are very controlling.
Yeah.
But I think that lends to this kind of situation.
It does. It absolutely does.
Only looking at Reuben and Joseph for the most part here, I have to believe there was a pecking order in this thing.
Oh, yeah.
This wasn't just two guys. This was a.
Yes.
How older brothers want to control younger brothers.
Right.
That any older sibling wants to control their younger
Yeah.
sibling.
It's like you always want to tell your youngest.
What's your first form?
But we already know Simeon and Levi, they got nasty.
Yes, they do. They have quite a temper.
They got a very nasty disposition.
Yeah.
They're not.
The youngest born.
And to be deceitful about it.
He ain't there. He's too young.
Let's hear it for the babies. Where's the baby?
Bambinos.
They get to stay home with their dad.
Joseph was the youngest, correct?
No, Benjamin is. Benjamin is the youngest.
He was the youngest until surprise Benjamin came.
Right.
I'm the oldest with my step-siblings and my actual siblings. However, I have one cousin who's old. I have a cousin who's 1 year older than me, and she tries to treat you as if I'm a child.
Of course.
The amount of times I wanted to smack her up.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, it's a hug.
Yeah.
Give her a hug.
So this again, this coat of many colors, the green here is actually a translation of what it says there. They stripped off Joseph his tunic. Tunic with sleeves of the long tunic which is on him. It is sleeves and length, which is that of a high muckety muck, so to speak.
There's only a few people that have these.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Probably living this naked too. They probably stripped him down naked. And the only reason why I think that, but we know that his life's parallel to Jesus's.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus was stripped naked on the cross. So,
Mm-hmm.
so he probably
Humiliated. I mean, the way to
completely humiliated.
Yeah. And I think one thing that comes out of this altogether is how angry and violent they really are at this point. And that's why Reuben has to say what he has to say, because he can't really.
Right. He can't.
I don't think
He can't. And that he was able to just get him thrown into the pit to delay the whole inevitability of this, which turned out to not be inevitable, but to delay that long enough for the next event to occur, which Reuben thought would be being able to get him out and take him home, but that's not what's going to happen. But you're right. This is extreme animosity, and Joseph is from a superficial viewpoint. Joseph is extremely lucky to have his life.
Yes.
What's that?
Crabs in a barrel mentality.
Yeah.
I think I would find it interesting because his tunic has colors. I would find it interesting if his tunic had the color green on it, thus representing the envy that his brothers feel for him.
Well, we don't know that it had colors, although it was translated. That translation is more interpretation than it is translation. The words here in green is a direct word-for-word translation.
Young's literal. So the authors of the King James, or the translators rather, the King James tried to do was they tried to pull culturally what they
Yes.
should.
Yes.
But Young's literal is a little bit less wooden. It's pretty good. Cometh to pass when Joseph hath come unto his brothers that they stripped Joseph of his coat, the long coat which is upon him. So it's
Right.
it's very similar.
It is. Because that's what it actually says.
The New American Standard says berry color too. That's how it represents.
Right. And there's interpretiveness to it's interpretive as opposed to translative. And don't get me wrong, you go from one language to another, and you have to have an interpretive ability, because otherwise you end up with that. Hard to read. That's correct. So where are we at here? Verse 24, and they took him and cast him in the pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. Could have been a dry well, could have been all kinds of things. Verse 25, and they sat down to eat bread. They're very satisfied with themselves now.
Wait. So you're telling me they threw him over, and like right by the hole where his brother is probably screaming in pain.
He is, because it says another place in the Bible that he was calling out to them.
They're eating bread.
Yes, they're eating lunch. And it's possible that Joseph carried that up to them.
Interesting thought right there. Say it again.
I said, once them eating a meal, they sound like a bunch of stubborn Baptists to me.
Not if it's sadistic.
Well, but remember,
Murdering.
I was going to say,
What is more fun than murdering him?
bingo.
Yes.
I get to listen to him cry out from, this pit as well.
Satisfaction.
Cry. Yeah.
It is. For them, it's very satisfying.
Sure, for them, having to listen to him tell them of this boasting of this dream he had of him ruling over them, and they're like going, okay, now rule over us. You're down at the bottom of a jet.
And I think that
you can't rule over us.
this is an excellent example of why, we should never, quote unquote, rejoice over the downfall of our enemy.
Yes.
Not only is Joseph getting humiliated and humbled here, because he is, for what you just said. What do you think? Now they're a good guy,
Yeah.
but they're the ones that are going to be staring back at him.
Correct.
And
But
this whole thing, just how God works through this.
that's the key.
It's just amazing.
Yes. And to your point, he's not just being humbled by them,
Oh my God.
by God,
Absolutely.
because he's got quite the swollen head. He's the favorite. He's got the coat. He had a dream. 2 of them. Both of them, same theme. Everybody's going to be bowing down to me. I'm so great.
Right.
And he's got to have,
Dream.
yeah, he's got to have all of his feet kicked out from underneath him several times, and this is the beginning of it.
If you think about it, he is betrayed by his own family.
Yes.
They're fighting sadistically within that.
Mhm.
And that's a deep emotional issue.
Yes.
When somebody that your family member betrays you, there's deep emotion involved in that.
It's scarring.
Yes.
Probably their enjoyment over this, which is why later they get very fearful when their father dies.
Yes.
Oh, now we're in the hands of Joseph.
Yes.
They're not coming out. There's no way he's not coming out of this without a trust.
Yeah.
But now the ultimate question, where did all of this start?
Ah.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
In Dad's shop.
Yep.
And Dad,
Failed miserably.
he failed with his wives, and he failed with each one of his kids.
But consider also, isn't this the model that was modeled to him
Yeah,
by Isaac?
it's intergenerational.
Yes.
If you look at the way Isaac ruled,
Mm-hmm.
destroyed his home.
It did. He absolutely did.
Of course, you look at Isaac and you look at his model of a home. Yeah, he went and slept with a concubine just to get Ishmael, just to throw them both out into the desert. Yikes.
Didn't even start with Jacob.
Yikes.
But yet Joseph, and it was kind of mentioned, but Joseph in chapter 50 becomes the comforter.
He does. What's interesting is Joseph, through this, has a kind of a persona of a type of Christ.
Oh, absolutely.
Through all this, not only here, but in his time in Egypt, and then ultimately, as you point out, in chapter 50. So, yeah.
Well, this is where you've got so many lessons to learn from.
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
this is one of those passages you could read, sections of passages that you could read 20 times, and you're going to come up with something different.
Correct. Who's a what? Oh.
I'll wait.
No, wait. You raised your hand, but you didn't speak up, because if I don't look that way, I can't hear your hand go up in the air.
I speak, but what I was going to say is that this is what happens when you do not address your generational problem, because it goes further and further and further. So, like, if you don't know that family can be an example, 9 times out of 10, somebody in your family is going to do the same exact thing. And it's going to get way worse than what it is.
What does it say? The sins of the father?
Yeah. And why is that?
It starts with the parent and the child speaking about it. And, you may not get some sort of reconciliation with the parent, but if you have to bring it to them in a kind, humble, loving way, But then after that, and you've laid it before them, then you're clear before you and God. If you're holding that against them, you've laid it before them, you say, I forgive you, and you move on. And you've got to break the chain.
That's the key. It has to break the cycle. Now, the cycle is going to be broken for Joseph in the next verse or two. It's going to start the breaking of that cycle. And Joseph will have his own family in Egypt later on, but all of the events of Egypt are going to be breaking this cycle.
This chapter is really also another thing about this chapter is it's really a teller of the importance of taking scripture in its totality, because you can't just read this chapter.
Right.
And it's because you have to know what happens in the future.
Yes.
To understand why this was.
Yes. Because otherwise you don't know why this is important, and you won't know until you get there. And once you get there, you go, oh, let me go back and look. And you go, oh, look here, look here, look here, look here.
Right.
It's also, we were talking about breaking the cycle of that, of problems within a family. It's hard to do that. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I am saying that one of the main reasons why it's not done often is because people who problems see no with the problem because they think it's not, they're used to it.
That's an interesting point.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to remember who I was talking to about this. That is a very interesting point from this perspective. Oh, Sunday morning. So Josh he laid out a beautiful lesson on idolatry. And one of the things that we brought up was an area that may be idolatry for one person is not necessarily an area of idolatry for another.
True.
And we have to be very careful to judge people on that, to that issue. And I always like to remind people we are all at a different place in our walk.
Mm-hmm.
Some are a little more mature in some areas than others, and maybe a little less mature than the same people in other areas. So I think that's a really interesting point. When you look at Joseph here, this to me is the beginning of the tremendous humbling that he goes through that allows him to be put in a position to be used.
Right.
I want to go back to the one thought that you brought forth there. And I'm talking about breaking the chains. I'd be very careful. Make sure, guys, that you understand this. It is not up to you to break those chains.
Right.
It is up to you to put yourself in position for the chains to be broken. There's a difference. A family that has an issue, let's use one for the guys. For a family that has an issue with pornography, and it's been generational, as a just saying, my job would be to put myself in a position where God couldn't break those chains. Getting on the internet and looking at stuff is not putting yourself in a position
Right.
for those chains to be. So I think that's a great point that you brought up there. I want you to be very careful. Don't think of that burden of breaking those chains being on you. It's not on you. It's on Christ. If you can, you just need to put yourself in the position that he can break it.
Right.
The side of that, you said the ignorance of what's wrong. So my family history, my father and my grandfather, again, the great-grandfather, all the way back, violence in the family, domestic violence. Specifically against kids, literally beating the hell away from the kids, getting the hell out of the very Catholic upbringing. They went to school black and blue and they didn't know it was different. The thing that changes that kind of a family is not knowledge of what's right or wrong, or this, that. It's a relationship
Amen.
with God.
Amen.
That is what develops not just the knowledge of what's right and wrong, because that doesn't change the people. It has to be a changing of what's inside.
Right.
And so that only comes, so if you know it's wrong, it doesn't matter. If it's tradition, if it's stubbornness, human heart will find a lot of reasons to hang on to something. That person has to fundamentally change, be transformed by the renewing of their minds through Christ. And that's something that we can do. It's the easiest thing in the world is the hardest thing. It's just submitting to his nature.
So let's look at verse 25 here, because opportunity suddenly comes up. And they sat down to eat bread. They lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites. Remember, notice the family name. Company of Ishmaelites come from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. Now, let me scroll down here a little bit because I want you to see these paths. These paths in red are the merchants' paths that were taken at that time. It comes across here out of this area and moves down. One of them comes across here, moves across the northern Sea of Galilee, and then pulls right down through the Jezreel Valley, which they are overlooking. So where they're stopped and eating, they're overlooking the Jezreel Valley, and they're seeing this caravan down in the valley. And that suddenly brings up opportunity. But notice these are Ishmaelites. And they've come out of, let me just kind of stand up here because it's a little easier to point this out here. This right here is their path heading down into Egypt. And they're seen right here, because that's where the brothers are, is right here. And they're coming across here, but they came out of, where did it say? Gilead. What's significant about Gilead? What's significant about Gilead? You remember when Jacob came out of Padanaram, he stopped and Laban caught up with him, and they had a powwow right there in Gilead. That space right there, the mountain of, what was it called? The Witness, Mountain of Witness, Gilead. That is where they came out of, right over here, the Mountain of Witness. So they're over here. Notice they actually came out of the area. There's Padanaram right up there, but they came down here, right out of this area. That's the path Jacob took out of Padanaram, by the way, is right along this path. He ends up here at Gilead. Now, Jacob's going to go this way, except he didn't. He went down here and he turned around and came around. But they're coming out of Gilead. This is Ishmael. Where's Ishmael living? This area and south. So they're along these paths all the time. This is Abraham's oldest son. Not Isaac, but his oldest son. Okay? So he's here. And the children are here. These Ishmaelites are here. These are traders, and they've got a large caravan. They're heading down to Egypt.
So they watched this happen. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the brothers, Joseph's brothers, had the vantage point of being up on a hill, probably about 1,000, 1,200 feet, looking over the Jezreel Valley. While they're eating lunch, they're going, oh, look at that down there in the valley. And they go out and get these guys. So opportunity knocks. Yeah. So look here, verse 26. And Judah is here. I was wrong earlier. Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother, if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brothers were content. They were satisfied with that. They were contented with that as a solution to this problem. Now, notice also verse 28, right here. Then they passed by the Midianite, or they passed by Midianites. I thought these were Ishmaelites. These are now Midianites. Who is Midian?
Offspring of Lot and
No. That.
Jethro, aren't they?
Huh?
They're down there with Jethro.
No. Well, they're in that area with Jethro, but they're not of Jethro. Okay. I'll get to it here in just a second. These are Midianite merchantmen, and they drew and lifted Joseph up out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And the Midianites and the Ishmaelites, they brought Joseph to Egypt. Now, again, who are these Midian? We know who the Ishmaelites are. Who are the Midianites?
Keturah?
Keturah, yeah. So he is one of the 6 sons of Keturah, Abraham's next wife after Sarah dies.
I just want to point something out.
Yes.
In verse 27, whenever he says he is our brother and our flesh, it feels like he's saying that with sarcasm. He wasn't being genuine. He was being sarcastic.
That's actually a Hebrew idiom. He's my flesh and blood, is effectively what he is saying.
Well, yeah.
But it's a Hebrew idiom. It just means he's family.
Yeah, but it felt like he was being extremely sarcastic, or not sarcastic. It seems like he was being like, "Why should we kill him and cover his blood? Why don't we do something better, like sell him to someone? Because after all, he is our family."
well, you got to remember something about Judah. Judah is kind of stingy in all walks of life. And if you read a little bit further a little more, you'll find out that Judah has a hard time being generous and being kind. So he's got this idea, but you do have this realization. He has this kind of this screwed up moral compass that he does come to.
Yes.
Very much like the Godfather. He's family. You know that's what we have going on here. It's family. We can't kill family.
By the way, Judah is the one in line to be the inheritor, the firstborn of the family, effectively, because Reuben's kicked out of it. Both Simeon and Levi are kicked out of it, and Judah's next. And he actually gets the actual blessing, birthright blessing.
Is there any possibility you think that maybe he's a little, now that they've settled down and the anger's passed, that he's feeling a little bit guilty too about?
Maybe.
And then this is, I mean, he doesn't want Joseph to go back. So this is a way to get him off his hands without actually killing him.
And coming into the next.
He does have a moral. The
Yeah.
guys have a problem.
He definitely feels guilty about it later on.
He does, because the next chapter, he just leaves the family. He goes out on his own.
He just owns himself.
Mm-hmm.
But at least with his treating of Benjamin down in Egypt, you get that he's definitely feeling guilty about it.
I was going to say that in chapter 44, and whenever Joseph plants the silver cup in
Into Benjamin's bag.
his bag,
Mm-hmm.
and then he uses that as a reason to keep Benjamin in Egypt, the person who pleads the case for why they need to bring Benjamin back is Judah.
It's Judah. Mm-hmm.
That's the same irony that you had with Reuben.
Yes.
You have now got with Judah.
Mm-hmm.
And funny enough, he mentions Joseph's passing, and I believe he did in chapter 3.
He does. With great regret. So he's got that full character arc, if you will.
Been stewing on him for a few years.
And, yeah.
So,
One more parallel, these pieces of silver.
yes. Not 30 pieces, 20 pieces, but still a piece of silver.
Eminence in all things. So he sold for more money than Joseph.
Right. So since Judah is here, that means 2 pieces of silver apiece.
Biden wasn't alive at the time. Sorry, I couldn't resist. I couldn't resist.
Yeah, but there's plenty of Bidens in the past, so.
Yes, yes.
We're not on fiat currency.
Yeah, they weren't using a fiat currency. They had real silver. They weren't,
Yeah.
He was sold for 20 pieces of silver, but the thing is that he was currency.
He was in Egypt. In Egypt, he absolutely was. He was a commodity to be sold. So, verse 29. After they sold him, and after they're going down to Egypt, Reuben returned to the pit. So Reuben was not aware of any of this. And behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his clothes. He rent his clothes. Verse 30. And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. Then, and they sent the coat of many colors that they brought it to their father. They sent it.
You completely skipped past verse 30.
Did I?
Yeah, you read from 29 to 30.
Ah, my error. Good catch, good eye. So let's back up. So he returned unto his brothers and said, "Where the child is not." And and I don't know. I don't know what and where I shall yeah. Yes. In other words, I got to find this kid.
What am I going to do? Yeah, I can't go home.
Yeah.
He's referring to his brother as a kid.
Oh. Yeah. I mean, he's 26, 27, 25, somewhere in there, and Joseph is 17, and that 10-year difference is huge.
No, I just find it funny because it makes them seem like more real. He was real, but I guess it kind of makes him seem like
By the way, it's not stated in here, but I can imagine, because it's a very common reaction, well, what's that to us? In other words, the rest of the brothers are going, yeah, he's gone. What's that to us?
Sorry, you weren't here. You don't get any silver. As soon as you live, dude.
Did it say where Reuben left and I missed it, or it's just telling us that he was gone and now he's back? It doesn't really say what he went.
It doesn't, I don't think that ever says where he went.
It does not.
It is interesting that he was not there.
Not there. Judah kind of sees the caravan.
Yeah.
tells them
And it
off.
doesn't even tell us that they killed him in on it either.
Right.
And that piece right there, that's what's really interesting in all of this, that we don't have any of that
Right.
information.
I
Right.
seem to have dropped something a few miles back. Let me go grab it. While he's gone, they sell their.
Guys, pardon me. I gotta go dig a hole. I'll be a while.
Yeah, because it doesn't necessarily fill you in. Then they said, hey, by the way, we sold him and got this silver. Here's your cut.
Yeah.
Or, you know, it's like,
You can get it.
well, they just said, oh, he done.
Backpack.
And it slowly turns into a devious plan of
Yes, it does.
getting it back to death.
It does.
Like, then, like, explain where Reuben went. It doesn't specify where he went. So it's like,
Yeah.
I can just imagine. I'm not saying this did happen, but I can imagine what went on with that. Oh, I appear to have dropped something a few miles back. Let me go back and get it. And while he left, they're like, okay, time to sell him.
Can we just assume that he went to pick the goat?
No, he would not have been in that plot.
The other thing of it is too, you're the brother, and his emotion is real because he's lost and thinks something bad happened. Perfect. You gotta go to dad, and his emotion is legit. You see, he tears his clothes. He's like, "Wait, this is not how I planned it."
Yeah.
About this. Where's the kid at?
No acting required.
And so they're like, "Dude, you're just gonna go home. We all did it. You're just gonna tell dad, and he's the one going up about it and send him back."
Well, somehow verse 32 plays into here because they sent the coat of many colors, that is the long tunic, and they sent it, but they brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Know you whether it be your son's coat or not?"
Like they didn't know. Like they didn't know.
Yeah.
It would be funny if Jacob would ask, "So where'd you get this pieces of silver from?"
I'm not sure that he even knew.
He probably doesn't know about it.
They quietly spent that later.
Yeah.
He's gonna spin that in a town on a girl here in a little bit.
Yes, he will.
Exactly.
It's pretty bad.
Father, we need to tell you this, but we seem to have lost our brother on our walk, and this is, not working with it.
Nikki, say that one more time. So,
It's a very dysfunctional thing.
and this,
But
this,
it's amazing how dysfunctional they really are and how God reaches down and uses it and chooses Israel and out of this mess.
So go there for a minute because that's important, and you see this later on as you get into Exodus and as you get into Numbers and you get into Deuteronomy. You see that unfold because God takes this dysfunctional family. By the time they go to Egypt, there's 70 of them.
Right.
So they go to Egypt, they become millions in Egypt over a 400-ish years period, and then they leave Egypt. They are still a dysfunctional people. And God is now going to take first 2 years, then the failure at Kadesh Barnea, so 40 more years. He's going to take that time to mold those who are under 20 years old. He's going to mold them into a nation. He's going to teach them how to be a people. And it's going to be a long, hard-fought battle to achieve that.
Now, this should give anybody hope.
Yes.
No matter where you are, what you've done. That God can take you from the most dysfunctional state and mold you into something. Because what we're seeing is first you're just starting out with Abraham and then Jacob and then this mess. And then we're moving into Moses and pulling him out of Egypt. And then he brings the law. So molding a little bit more. Then after that, so it's just such a process.
It is.
And we take so much of it for granted. We have all of it right in front of us.
And think about just how much more us. Because I get reminded as I look at your all's way and I see the stuff of the book of Revelation up there. Just think of how much we get to like chapter 5 there, and where those 24 elders sitting on thrones wearing crowns. Just think of us being in that position one day, because that's where we're going to be, sitting around the throne, worshiping the Lamb, and we're going to look back and think like, man, look what I did, and look where I am now. It's like unbelievable. Same thing.
Yes.
It's like, man,
How did I get here?
how did I get here? Thank God he did this. Praise. No, that's why we're throwing them crowns at his feet.
Yes.
Because it's like, thank you. Because we look back and we're, how dysfunctional my life was, and look where I'm at. Look where I'm at.
Yes.
But you know what Hannah said is really important, because she said when you grow up, and that's all you see, that's all you think.
Correct.
And when God comes on the scene and he starts laying down
Yes.
who he is, love and grace and mercy and a better way of life. And it's so important. And it takes you away from it.
But to all of this, Don't lose this one key factor. Think in terms of the children of Israel being molded into a nation over a 42-year period. 2 years at Sinai, 40 years wandering. A 42-year. God used 42 years to mold the nation. He also used 42 years to prepare another guy to take the reins of power. Remember him? Got a whole book written about him. Right? He took over after Moses. Joshua. 42 years in training to take over that position.
Yeah, they lived a lot longer back then.
Well, he
training for like 40 some odd years in Midian.
he was 40 years in Egypt, he was 40 years in Midian, and he was 42 years, and he died at 120.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
This is like a really screwed up version of We Lost Our Brother at the Mall.
Kind of on purpose, but don't say that.
We don't mention the part that we sold the mall. That part. We just lost.
So notice the symbolism here. The coat, which now actually represents the love of Jacob for his son. The father's love for his son. And notice the blood. That right there is the death of that son. That is now in Jacob's mind, his son is dead. He knows no different. His son is dead. And notice the dysfunctional family profited out of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
I find it interesting that the brothers do not care that they brought their father
Their father was probably the source of their frustration.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to say,
It's getting back and down.
Yes.
Yeah, but they're still in a way, they're still looking for his validation, or rather, they're.
I think they don't care about it here, but later on,
Yes.
you can tell that
Yes.
it eats at him.
It eats at him.
Eats at him.
well, and when, I think the culmination of it, when they stand before him, they're freaked out when they find out
Who he really is, yeah.
I think they're very grateful that they are in the position that they all are. And it's all going to come,
Yeah.
it's all going, oh, that's what this is all about. But I still can't get over, and this is to their culture. There is a pecking order here,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote, not to be messed with. That's a big root of
Yes.
all this thing.
Yes, it is. Because,
In their culture, I mean, we still get it today.
yeah.
Yeah, we do, but in I'm going to say Western culture, do we really care who the firstborn is?
Some,
Jewish
yes, some families, yes.
families.
So Jewish is
So
Again, from the,
English
no, but I'm not
or
saying.
Eastern.
I'm saying if you have any Bohemian families, the firstborn,
Yeah.
like anyone who is, if it's Italian, Greece,
Mhm.
talking about anything, anywhere in the Balkans,
mhm.
gosh, some British.
And in the Muslim world,
Yes.
is huge.
And I think even missionaries that were in Japan and first ones,
Yes.
they're big. And
Yes, they are. Mm-hmm.
This one gentleman would come to their church. I mean, this was many years ago, but he could not accept Christ because he was the firstborn, and there was so much invested in him that if he accepted Christ, it would cause such a problem in the family.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Even now, there are different syndromes for different. Supposedly, there are different syndromes for different birth orders in the family. There's the oldest sibling syndrome. Basically, they're the oldest. They hold all of the responsibilities. They're the most responsible.
That's
The middle sibling syndrome, basically, they're in between the oldest and the youngest, and they're not paid attention to at all. They're basically completely forgotten. They're
Spoiled. Spoiled. The babies are spoiled.
Yes, the babies are spoiled. That's the younger sibling syndrome.
Yeah.
Spoiled. They're carefree. They're full of
I disagree. Growing up black, no, the oldest is always going to be looked upon as like the baby, the one that's going to be, you know, pacified and everything. Like they're going to look after the oldest and the youngest. The youngest is just an afterthought. It's like, oh, well, that's just Chauncey.
We're having therapy class right now.
That's interesting.
Chauncey, don't.
I agree with your mother in this situation.
That's okay, Chauncey, you know, you just.
We did your
You brought it on yourself, buddy.
Don't worry.
My sister actually experienced this myself a little bit as the older sibling, and I have a baby sister, quite literally. She just turned 4. Whenever this happened within the same time span, within like a minute, I have been scratched all the way down my back by my cat. Because my cat fell off my back and scratched himself, so he scratched all the way down my back. I tell my mom and my stepdad about this. He'll be fine. Don't worry about it, even though my back is burning and stinging. My sister, who was a baby at the time,
Pretty in the park.
no, she fell on the carpet, but she's completely safe. She's completely unharmed.
Mm-hmm.
But Mom, she wasn't even born at the time. Mom and David, my stepdad, immediately come rushing out.
Of course.
Okay, but there's no scrape on her. Wait till she's urine.
And then it'll be fine. That's right. It has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with. No, it has everything to do with now you're older. You can take care of it. You can handle it. Don't worry about it. But that one can't. That's the mindset.
It's like severed off. I have three sisters and important life events. It's like the family dynamic change. Like my older sister, she's now married. And my dad and mom were like, oh, we're about to give our baby away. Like, as the prized child, being the firstborn.
Uh-huh.
And my dad was like, being a pastor dog. He was like, it was easier for me to preach my dad's funeral than for me to give my daughter away. It's interesting how that all plays out.
Right. And it wasn't the same when you were married.
No.
It was not. And that's because now they have experienced one of them, and the parents now realize, life still goes on. So life will go on here too.
I find it interesting that even though I was still basically a child, I wasn't even an adult yet whenever I was still living with my mom. Even though there were literally 2 legal adults in the house, I was the one picking up broken glass bottles, cleaning up blood after my mom had a 2-hour nosebleed and basically raising my sister.
Yeah. That is. I mean, you're describing about 80% of families in America. That's the way it works.
You look at some of that, and then you look at some of this here. It's just a different type
It is.
of dysfunction. And I look at verse 34 there, Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son.
Many days.
You can see where his heart lay.
Yeah.
This wouldn't have happened with a Judah. This wouldn't have happened with a
Yeah, or a Simeon or a Levi. Yeah.
This is all about one.
But how did you know this would have happened?
Because of the way that he treated him to begin with.
Yes.
He treats Benjamin next. Correct. And you see the way he treats Benjamin and the way that he's going to sacrifice Simeon, I believe, before Benjamin.
Right.
Later on in about 3, 4, 5 chapters.
Yes.
It's like, Simeon.
What
he's
Yes.
got a lot of redundancy in his reminders of Leah, but not so much for
Yes.
Correct. This is about Rachel, the one he loved, but the one that he got cheated out of by she not being his first wife. He got cheated. And then Laban goes ahead and, quote, makes it right, but it's not right.
For sure.
Well, also I noted here, it was very interesting in verse 35. How many daughters do we know?
I only have one, but
We know about Dinah or Dinah.
Dinah, yeah. And all his sons and all his daughters, plural, not dual,
is that daughter-in-law still?
could be,
I mean,
could be.
But the thing is Dinah is only, this is gonna sound really, really bad, only mentioned because of what happened.
it's true.
And so, unfortunately, in that culture, in that day, they did not follow the woman's line.
Right.
The only exception you see is where God reaches out and says, this is my son's line. I'm
Mhm.
to mention Ruth then.
Yes, I can't, Rahab, yes.
Yeah, I feel like if I ever had a daughter, she would have been treated way more unfairly.
So, so here, and to your point, you are right, but Dinah was mentioned from birth on.
This is true. But again,
But
it was written in retrospect.
yes, it was.
So
It was. And to your point, written so that you build the storyline to that.
likely written by Joseph, although there's an argument to be made it wasn't. This part was written by Joseph.
So here again, he rent his clothes. He put sackcloth upon his loins. In other words, that's what he wore. And he mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted. And he said, "For I will go down into my grave unto my son, into the grave unto my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him.
Contrast to David.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm kind of analyzing this on the fly. This is almost a refusal of Jacob to accept his wrongdoing in all of this. And yet David was comforted, but admitted his wrongdoing.
Yes.
What a contrast.
It's the difference of having the Spirit. Let's say something radical here. I think this is the difference of the Spirit working on you and you being in communion with the Spirit.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think it's just necessarily the man. I think it's a lot easier to do that when the Spirit of God is on you.
So consider this. You remember, God told Jacob to leave Padanaram. He ends up at Gilead. He then decides to go to Shechem. He hooks up there with Canaanites of the land. All goes awry because he should not be hooking up with the Canaanites of the land. And God says, "Go to Bethel." God did not tell him to leave Bethel. Jacob's doing a lot of going on his own and not paying attention or not seeking God, not following God in all of this. And even here, there's no mention in any of this throughout, from the time he left Bethel until now. There's no altar being built. There's no worship of God. There's nothing going on in Jacob's life. He has effectively walked away from God. But God has not walked away from him.
That's, boy.
I'm sorry, but yeah, the fact
Do you know what sackcloth is?
I can.
Do you know what a potato bag is? No, you probably don't. Do you know what a burlap sack is? That's burlap, effectively.
Yeah, just imagine.
And it itches horribly.
Yeah, that's giving me.
Exactly.
It's probably to make them suffer.
Yeah,
Right.
it gave me goosebumps. I
Right.
understand that that's how they warned them, but that just gave me goosebumps.
They wore it because it is an outward emblem of an inward mourning. They afflict their outward to demonstrate that the inward is being afflicted. That is very common in that area of the world. We don't do it here. I mean, some, but we don't do it as much here. They do it openly. They put dust on their head. They rip their clothes. They do all these things that are outward statements of an inward pain.
Like I said, that's part of warning, and I understand that that was what they did. That was their custom. That's still not.
Yep.
Wait, you said that they ripped their clothes whenever they were
When it says rent
showing
their
Yeah.
clothes,
Rent.
what it means.
outward pain. Then that's what what's his name? Ruben did.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Mhm.
to the
Mhm.
pit. He ran his clothes because he was,
This is a-
yeah, the deep emotion going on there.
Mhm.
So if you think about the WWE wrestlers when they come out,
No,
Verse 36.
There are some good movies where you actually see the person. I'm trying to remember if they did it. I don't think they did. But there's some good Bible movies where you see it and it makes really, it's very clear.
Yeah, the emotion behind it, yeah.
I'm undone. I'm broken.
you see it in modern cheesy love movies whenever the guy's broken over his
I'm just saying something. I think the British get it right. Stiff upper lip, man up. Like if you're a man, stiff upper lip, man up. Conceal, don't feel. Amen.
There is value in that and there's harm in that. Verse 36. Let's see if we can finish this chapter.
Read verse 36 at home.
Verse 36. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, which we will not find out, for next week will not be the following chapter will not be about this. So it'll be the chapter after that. An officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the Pharaoh's guard. So it'll be all the way to chapter 39 before we begin to see what's going on with the rest of the story of Joseph. But chapter 38, we will see a sorted detail or tale of Judah's life. And it's, again, part of a dysfunctional family.
Yeah, like that.
God can use that.
Yes.
Should have some hope going home tonight.
Yes. Gives a lot of hope for me.
Guys, glad you were here tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Want to encourage you to be here Sunday. You teaching Sunday or not? I'm actually going to.
No, I think that because I only
And that's why I'm double checking. So I'm going to be following up on Josh's lesson of idolatry.
I'm gonna help him.
Do they know?
I came up with a very funny joke here. This one is so good. Is it a dad joke? No, this is kind of a dad joke.
Oh,
It's also pretty good. So,
bed off.
it's did you know that Abraham's servant was the first college-educated person? He went to study abroad. Bro. This thing goes.
You're not-
Yeah, I think we.
Goes back to, he went to study abroad. You gotta say in the accent.
You better find it quickly.
Thank you so much for the time we had tonight. What hope it really does give us when we look at just the way we do it, study it, and see that there's a lot of dysfunction, some hatred going on. And yet, in spite of all that, we still use, Lord, in spite of all the different areas of dysfunction that we might have in our own families, all the areas of, I'm going to say, regrets, you are still willing to use us if we'll just allow ourselves to use. So, Lord, I just pray that you would help us to see the true hope that this should provide. And Lord, I thank you for me taking through these chapters. I pray that you would bless each and every one here tonight. Lord, as we go to and fro in the marketplace, in the workplace, I pray that you would help us to impact people for your kingdom's sake. We ask this in Jesus' name.
Amen.
No, dude, that joke, tell me that joke. Tell me that joke. You want to know real funny joke? Whoa. No, see, that's a good.
Get it, get it, never good.
You're never gonna walk. I was saying.
Go downstairs.
Yeah.
What time are we gonna? That was very good. Very good study. I mean, I've read Genesis many, many times, but until you start staring it apart, you really miss a
Right,
lot of
right.
study.
Yeah, that's why I advocate that we are not to read the Bible, we are to study the Bible.
And there's a big difference. So, I didn't bring it up, but you talked about Joseph, who just got ripped apart from his family. But that's when God really starts to mold and shape him. And that's really what happened when I got married, is that we moved away from family.
Friends are gonna see you.
And that's when our life started to change.
That's what happened with Debbie and I. We went on our wedding day. We went right after the wedding to pick up the car that we had pre-positioned and drove to California. Because I had to go back to boot camp.
So you take it, yeah, but that was the change.
Mm-hmm.
That was what Charlie said, that's how God broke the chain. I don't think we're still married.
Yeah.
How are you? Okay. Have a good week.
Mr. Glenn, have a good evening. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Summer 20.
It's probably, yeah.
Hey, this weekend, Saturday, we have a men's breakfast going on. Young guys want to show up, be there.
What?
I don't work 12 hours that night, and I get off at 6. I'll probably leave work.
Oh, that, where we have.
They played.
You'd be staying up anyway. You're not gonna go right to sleep.
Where we hang that.
I'll tell you what, when I worked